Okay, hey guys, just going to go over how we're going to get set up for our engraving on this armor. So for this armor, I'm going to extract basically 3 different types of engraving that we're going to be using all over the armor. We have 3 different patterns here. We have our main large pattern that will go down the center of the body and on large places like the thighs and down the center of the legs and arms. Here we have our embossing engraving that will go around all the edges and will also act as a border to this main piece here. This will be also tiling. And our last piece, this little flower with a little thing coming out the top, will be sitting all around the borders and will just add a nice flourish. So that's our 3 patterns. So when it comes to engraving, a lot of patterns follow the same sort of structure. They're generally quite curly, looped, based on flowers and leaves. So they'll generally follow this up and down round pattern with parts coming off it and curling. As you can see, we've got the large shapes here and they curl off into smaller and smaller subdivisions. And the same is here for our little edge pattern. The larger pattern is a bit more complicated, but still follows the same sort of things. See, just lots of leaves and curls, just all in harmony together. Here we've got some wings, a lot of themes of angels, cherubs, just pretty things. So you can see this pattern just repeats nicely all the way down the side, giving a nice border for this main pattern here. So it helps to think about how this would actually have been made when it comes to engraving. It's not just drawn on or embossed. It's actually been hammered into the metal. You can see where it's got some overlap here, where the chisels overlapped into the line there. Like it's actually just been rammed in and cut into the metal. In between, we have some little circles here, it's called stippling, which gives us sort of shadow and background for the patterns to pop off against. Another thing that's used in engraving is a technique called niello, which I touched on earlier, which is the process of adding a darker powder, usually sulfur, with some sort of mixture, again to make the pattern pop against the engraving. You can see that you can just find it all over and in these little pieces here. Okay, so that's primer on engraving. I'm just going to show you how to get these patterns now set. Okay, here we've got our 3 different patterns. This is the main border pattern. You can see I've just used some of the shapes, just curls and stippling in between. Just keeping the lines nice and thin so we don't get it looking too blocky when it comes to applying it to the mesh. And we need to still keep in mind the resolution if this will actually come up. So it's a bit of trial and error when it comes to this stage. Here is the main pattern going down the middle. You can see it's got a lot of stippling in between. And the main lines are kept nice and thin. Here is our final pattern on the edge. Again, this needs to be simple. You won't need to tile, so it's fine just to keep it as a stamp like this. Alright, and these look like they're ready to go. I'm just going to go over some of the engraving that I was using on Lordling. The general theme was it was a raven kind of style. It was mainly about feathers and kind of flowing feathery patterns. These were some of the main ones I used. So this feather pattern here, made sure it was alternating, would have gone across the entire armour, similar to how we have in here. So that was my border. So that was my border pattern. Here this main feather pattern was going on the gauntlets, so it was like a secondary pattern. And this was just a nice tile stamp I made to go all the way around the belt. Even though this breaks the theme a bit, it's still nice just to have it as a little pattern flourish just on the edge of the belt. Okay, now we can apply our engraving alphas to the actual mesh. Hey guys, I'm going to start applying the engraving alphas we made earlier, actually onto our mesh. We can start finalizing the texture. Unfortunately, with what comes with Painter, we can't really make a smooth transition with our alpha stamp. But fear not, the wickedly talented Alex Liu has provided a roll brush which you can grab from his Gumroad, and then the install instructions come with it. It's really quite simple to get started with this, and it is perfect for our needs here. Actually, I think it came out just as I was putting this tutorial together, so it was very handy. So once your brush is installed, just type in roll, and it should come up with the roll alpha brush. That's what we need. I'll just make sure you're updated with the latest Substance Painter, as this won't work with any earlier version than 2019.2. So once your brush is installed, just type in roll in the shelf. Should come up with roll alpha brush. Double click on that so it loads it into our tool. You can see here it's just set to arrow by default. If that's all working, then you're all good to go. But we don't want an arrow, we want some engraving. So once you've just imported your texture in, you can drag and drop it into the image input. Let's do a test. Oh, looks like it's the wrong angle. So we just go down to the parameters of the grayscale area and not the one up here, and just set that to 90 degrees just to flip it. It looks like it's added in an alpha. We'll just get rid of that. We only want the image input right at the bottom to be working. Also make sure you have your lazy mouse setting, as it relies heavily on that. You can set it to something quite low. Just here. Set it to 8, should give us enough lazy mouse distance. So you can see everything's nice and smooth now. Let's get a really nice stroke. It really works even on very tight corners. It does eventually break, but that is good enough for now. So I'm just going to add in some engraving here to our embossed edge. See, we can just go in there nicely around that edge. You can always come back and redo any bits that went wrong. Actually, see, we can just do the shift, hold shift to do a straight line. For example, here, here, here. Still keeping that really nice, consistent stroke. See, it's repeating perfectly along. And just for a bit more around here. You see sometimes you get some overlap with the different meshes, but you can just come back and delete that out when you don't need it. I'll be providing these brushes if people need them, but you can save your own tool presets as long as you have the roll brush installed. Just here and then do create tool preset. It'll save all the settings of the alpha, the rotation. You can just reuse it every time. So now that we have our alpha in, just in the mask of the fill as always, call that engraving 1, just so we know what it is later. Put it into our engraving folder. So what we've actually done, the actual alpha is the cut point, as in where the chisel would cut into the metal, is the actual slice. So if we set this to a darker colour, as this will be filled with yellow as well as a lot of dirt, and then we can just set the height to something very subtle. So it's just very slightly into the mesh. Not too much, although that starts to get too blobby. Just testing to see. Since the background's already quite dark, we can make it a bit darker. You've got a nice base for your engraving along the edge here. But it's not really popping against the metal yet, as the metal's quite dark, the engraving is quite dark. We'll need something to make it boost it a bit. So we'll just add an anchor point here, and we can reuse the edgeware we made for the metal, and we can use it on our engraving. So just a case of copying and pasting over. So instead of using the emboss height that I was using before, we can use the mask as a height mask. So engraving 1 mask. We'll just flip that. See, it's already coming up in the mask, and there you go. Since the edges are quite fine, it will cover the entire area. Just remove the existing curvature in AO, as we just want the engraving mask to be doing the work. And there you go, you've got some very quick engraving, which you can control all the depth and edgeware very easily. Right, I'm just going to show you with a bigger pattern. Let's just duplicate that one, call it edgeware 2, add a black mask to clear out that mask, and then we're going to, using the same brush, going to change the input from that engraving to the larger one. Let's have a look. Yep, if you ever get this kind of effect, it just means your alpha is rotated the wrong way, but that can be easily remedied by setting the input rotation in the roll map section to 90 or 0. It's quite small. And there we go, this will be our main large pattern that goes over a lot of these center pieces. Just drag all the way down, it just repeats really nicely. Yeah, and there you go. So it's looking quite dark than yellow here. We can either set it to be a bit lighter, or just add a bit of opacity to it. Now just to make it pop again, we can do the same trick as before, just adding an anchor point into the edgeware. To invert it so it's actually hitting the edges rather than the inside. And there you go, you've got a nice edgeware on the engraving itself. See, you didn't have to do any high poly work for that, it's just all nicely set in our texture. Just boosting the height of it. Oh, that's too much. Actually, it's a good point. Yeah, some of this will be a bit too much. You can see how it's getting a bit blobby and low res. We don't want to exaggerate those kind of defects. So just keeping it very subtle. Yeah, you can play around with this till it looks good. So now we have that main one there, we can add in, come back and add in its borders, as you saw in the concept. Just set that to 90 degrees, I think that's should be correct. Let Substance think for a minute with this gigantic alpha I'm using. And just hold shift and bam, straight down the side. Let's try that again. And there you go. Got a nice border for that edge. Let's just add a bit of roughness as the yellow would have. We can clean up where the two meet just by using a basic brush. It'll probably keep the settings here from before, so we'll just take that off of grayscale and set it to its defaults. Get rid of the lazy mouse for now. You can see Substance is struggling a bit just because I'm using anchor points. It really doesn't seem to like working out with them once you've set them in. It's because it's recalculating the anchor point every time you draw a stroke, as it collapses it and makes it into a flat texture. You can see we've got a nice border there. And now we'll just add little flourishes on the side. Again, we can just duplicate those settings, add a black mask, add a paint. Since it's not one continuing pattern, we can just use the default brush and stamp it along. Add this into the grayscale. See, it's coming up here, so we sort of already know what it is. Didn't actually know you could do that in Painter, that's handy. Right, and there you go. Just make sure it's following the path, so as you draw, it's correct on the stroke. Looks like it's a bit too high for us at the moment. Spacing is actually quite large in the concept. Might actually be worth just to stamp it along as we like. If you hold down Control and press up and down with your brush selected, you can adjust the angle. Just make sure it's not too low res for our mesh. We can start stamping these in. And some roughness to pop that yellow and dirt. And there you go. Stamp along here. And there you go, got a nice little flourish on the end of the border. So that's it. when it comes to the engraving, that's how I'd approach it right now. Just generally trying to shift details like this into Substance Painter rather than doing it in high poly, just because we have so much more control over this. You know, we can just add things when and where we like them, and we can adjust the depth, color. You know, we've got so much control here. We can easily erase and redo areas. It just really helps. Hey guys, I've just shown you one way we can do engraving. I'm just going to show you another. This sort of mimics how we would have done engraving in something like ZBrush. Instead, we're going to do it straight in Painter. So I'm just going to bring up a basic brush. Just make a regular layer. It doesn't need to be a fill layer for this. And we can just set the layer just to use normal, as we're essentially going to be using a normal map as a brush. So here I've made this stamp here, which is essentially a quad pyramid that will just be used to cut into the metal or mimic something like that. You can make this simply just by making a collapsed box in something like 3ds Max, and then converting it into a normal map just by baking it to a plane. Or you can use the brush I will provide. So just set that to our normal. Let's try it. So, oh yes, we need to set it to sign normalized. This means it will take into account the direction of the normal. You can see we've got a good start there. Nice chunky cut. We can reduce the flow so it's not so deep. And yeah, there you go, you've got a nice sort of chiseling effect. So if you wanted to do any manual brushwork straight onto the mesh, you would be able to do using this. Just making something up there. But yeah, you get the idea. So, like before, we can use anchor points to use it in engraving or cavity stuff. Just make a fill layer, add a generator, add a mask editor. Once again, we can just remove the curvature from here, as we just want the cavity coming from the normal. Add our anchor point to the normal, make sure it's using the normal. Then make sure you turn on the normal. You can see it's already coming through. It's coming through a bit strong. So we'll just take everything off but fine. So that's the cavity, so it's just on the inside. And there you go. Got a nice dark inner. And we can do the same in reverse if we want any edge wear. So you see, updates that. It's a bit slow since it's using anchor points. And let's just do a quick example of how we would make an edge wear from this as well. Add a black mask, generator, use the mask editor rather than the edge wear, just because we'll get a bit more control over it. Once again, set the normal to normal and normal, and then turn on normal. Just keep it on edges. So you can see it's already picked up there. Oh, it's picking up the other curvature. Turn that off, set it to 0.5. And there you go. So tone that down. Increase the metallic right up, reduce the roughness. Actually, we can just rely on the metallic from beneath. Give us some more variety. See, and there you go. And so we've got some nice engraving we can do here. Since we got a lot of anchor points in here, we can always disable them just by dragging a layer on top of them. You'll see the red dash will pop up to indicate that they're broken, but it means you'll be able to paint a lot faster without any lag. And we can just bring it back down underneath and it will just update all the anchor points again. So yeah, there's something if you want to do more freehand engraving. Hey guys, just going to go over a few finalizing details we can add to our texture. We've got all our engraving in place, all using the same techniques as I described before. And first area I'm going to go over is just some edge chipping. You can see these slight little dents here just along the edge where it would have just caught and whacked against areas. This is something we'd used to have to do in ZBrush, but we can just do very easily in Painter. So just adding a basic black mask with a paint layer. You can see I've done some already, and this is just very easy to reproduce this brush. So we'll just take a pressure size. We've used our edge engraving alpha from before as it gives us a nice cut shape. And we can set our spacing to be quite wide. So we want some randomness along this edge, as it'll just look a bit more natural rather than having uniform chips all along. Just adjust the flow a bit so some are more indented than others. Angle will give us some different angled ones. And that should be good. Let's just try that along a big space. There you go, it's still looking quite uniform. Let's just adjust some more settings here. Now let's try along this edge here. Still too much. That's what the culprit is, it's the flow. We want to reduce the flow a lot more. So here you go, we can just add some of this denting along here. And since it's looking a bit too much at the moment, we can just scale it back by adding some black to the texture, to the mask, sorry. Okay, and there you go. We've got some nice bit of denting in there. Should generally work across UV seams as well. You can see it's given us a decent result. Okay, next area is coming back to our edge wear and just making sure it's not completely uniform everywhere. We really don't want that effect. So we just go back to our edge wear mask and add a paint layer. There's a few brushes that come with painter that are decent for this, such as the artistic brushes. So they have a nice, large, noisy alpha, as you can see. And we can just start pushing away some of that edge wear. Especially on big rounded cylindrical areas. Yeah, just paint this all back. You're going to break all this up because people can spot this generator from a mile away. You see it on a lot of textures. Doesn't take that long just to, break everything up. It's not just about scaling it all back. We can add some more into a few edges that would get bumped and scratched. Can use the edge wedges to pop a few lines where that's fine, down the middle for example. Okay, that's enough for that. Hopefully get a good idea of what I mean. Another area we can do some hand painting and finalizing in is the AO dirt. So when we made this before, it was just using the generators. We can just knock some of this back using a soft brush. The artistic brushes are very handy for this. So just about slightly reducing these overly done areas. This armour has been used, hasn't just been sitting and waiting to rust away, so the dirt wouldn't be that harsh. Especially around here, it looks like it's just sitting in a drain. So we can knock all this back. Okay. Also on the straps we can employ the same kind of thinking. Oh, not the holes. There we go. So I've done some already on here, but we can always just add a bit more. So on the end of these straps is where the greasy fingers will be fiddling with them and putting them in and out. So there'll be a lot more dirt build up on these areas. Also we want to just reduce that very generated edgeware look that we get, especially here. So you don't want these big straight lines here, it gives the game away. So we just want to rely on generators to be there for the areas that are less seen, but we want to hand paint the areas that you do. Just one more detail we can add to the armour. As you may have noticed, it's looking quite smooth, even with all the grunges doing the work. It should still be sort of battered and dented into place with a bit of war damage to boot. So we're just going to add some very slight denting just all over the texture. Just add a fill layer as always. Just add a fractal sun for this, just something big and cloudy. See, it's a bit intense there. And so instead of just working in the mask, we're going to work straight in the height. This is so we have both the white and the black values going up and down. We're not just going in one direction. So just add a filter that will affect just the height. Below that, obviously still looking way too ridiculous, so we'll just add a levels on top of that, set it to affect height. We can just adjust these till we get something decent. So yeah, with stuff like this, you almost don't want it to be seen, like it's just something that doesn't draw the viewer's attention. It's just there as a background detail. You don't want them to think like, oh, this is so dented. You just want it to be sort of very subtle. And it's the kind of thing that if it wasn't there, you would notice it. But if it is, you don't in a way. Let's just adjust the value through here. You can actually, if you double click the arrows, you can adjust the number in there. This is something I found out very recently. You can see there, it's got these nice little specular hits where it's just picking up that slight denting. See, with it turned off, it just looks as though it's missing something, so it really adds just a nice bit of extra detail. Alright, and that's it for the texture work. Pretty much wrapped up in the texture department here. We can now move on to rendering and presenting. Hey guys, right, let's get him presented and ready. I've just brought in the armor into a marmoset scene here. I've just saved the boring bit and just created some materials for him. There's nothing fancy here, it's just your standard metalness workflow, roughness, albedo, ambient occlusion, etc. Right now that he's all in, he's looking a bit flat and a bit plain, so let's start doing some nice adjustments. So generally we're going to be following a sort of classical style for this armor. We're going to be using influences from classical painters like Van Dyck, and my main reference here will be this Charles I painting. But it's always very good when you're rendering to have a look at how the masters rendered real life, and it's a great place to draw inspiration from. So before we start adding some lights, I'm just going to make sure the tone mapping is set to, I'm going to set the tone mapping to Hedgel here, I think it is. This gives us a lot more contrasted darks and brighter spots of light, and it's already a big improvement from just setting it to linear. Just going to make sure our sky mode is color and not using the sky. We don't want a horrible blurred skybox in the background. And I'm going to just choose something warm and not too overbearing. You want the sky just to sort of help bring out the metals rather than direct the mood of the whole render. And his house also a very good one here. See, it's very subtle, slight sky picking up in there. Yeah, we can start with this. So as you can see in the painting, there's usually one very strong source of light, and we're going to just add one in. Just add a light, change it from spot to omni. I'm just going to bring it right above the head, which is generally where the light source is in these old paintings. Should be somewhere near the head. Can adjust the distance to blur our shadows a bit, and let's give the lights a slight bit of warmth. Again, we don't want there to be too much colour coming in from the lights, as it will be a bit overbearing, but we just want a hint of it. So there you go, it's already starting to look pretty decent. So you can see you want just the light coming in at the top, picking up all the interesting parts in the focal area, and then just fading out to dark on the lower parts. So just a quick thing about bases. We're going to just add a shadow catcher at the bottom here. So just, as you can see, even though our scene is quite dark, let's just line it up just so I can show you. It'll add some shadow and sort of place our armor in the world rather than it be floating. If If you want to make a custom base, like a sort of ground texture or brickwork or something, just make sure it matches the quality of the rest of your piece. I've seen a lot where people have thrown in very rushed bases in their character, and it just really drags the quality of the overall piece in. So if you want to make a ground piece, just make sure you put in the effort to match the quality and the amount of work you put into the rest of it. Or if you want to avoid having to make a base, you can go ahead and just use something like a shadow catcher or a simple gradient just fading out on the ends. Either way, you want to make sure your character is placed in the world. Okay, we can just tweak some settings in the sky. So one light's good, but it's not enough for now, as it means we're not picking up everything. A lot of stuff is getting lost here that we want to show off. So I'm just going to make a secondary light by Control D to duplicate it. And just bring it over here and further away. So it's very similar to like a classic 3-point light setup. Just gonna make it a bit slight. Just reduce the brightness on that light a bit so it's not competing with our main fill light. It's just a secondary one just to add in a few more light spots to the details. For this armor, I've just got a basic mesh set to black underneath. Just kind of thinking like how it would be in a museum. It would have like a dummy inside it. As you can see, I'm just using very desaturated colors in our lights here. I see people doing a lot is the classic orange and blue, very strong coming in from either side. I'm personally not a very big fan of that, as it makes it look very gamey, if you know what I mean. It just makes it like scream, you know, this is a game asset, rather than making it something a bit more realistic. So just using more natural tones. You can add a slight rim, just to get some hits on our details along the edges. Just set this to a more cooler colour, as it would just be, in theory, the sky sort of. Just set that to a cooler colour, just because we want it just to pick up little details and not, again, not compete with our main light. So a handy thing, handy trick is we can link our lights to the sky just by dragging it underneath until that green line comes up. So it's all part of the sky group now. And you see, as we rotate the sky, holding shift and right click, the lights rotate with it, which is handy so our scene doesn't break every time we change the lights. Okay, and that looks like our lighting setup is complete. The only thing left to do is take some renders. I just use as large settings here. Just at least double the viewport. Make sure everything's whacked up, your sampling, etc. And make sure your format is PSD, so there's at least compression possible. And there you go, you can start taking some shots. And at this point, it's just really about tweaking your lights and possibly going back into Painter and adjusting some materials. But if you're just checking your materials in Painter that they're PBR compliant, They should come up just fine in here. So that's the end of the presentation and the end of the project. Right, so that's the end of creating armoured characters. Hope you guys have enjoyed it and learned something and made something cool. Look forward to seeing what you guys have made.